Alright guys, I am back again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Deer Days on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my Brandt Gate Griphogila Dragontree deck. So version 1, everything through the additional special set, so the final DLC for this game, which takes us through a fraction of D-Booster Set 11. And this deck is the 5th and final variant of Griphogila that I have built, which this variant of the deck does still want to stall out the game until turn 6, so you can do your big over-trigger play just like the others. However, since this is a Brandt Gate deck, you're building towards a big Eldo Breath turn, which Eldo Breath is arguably the best over-trigger in the game. So this variant of the deck probably has, again, arguably the most devastating finisher turn out of the 5 variants. However, the actual main deck is a little bit on the janky side. We have robbed some Orfist support and built around that to focus on generating Shadow Army tokens and using them to sort of create some advantage. However, since we are relying on set orders in typical Brandt Gate fashion, we do have a lot of no shield value cards in this deck. So surviving to turn 6 can be a task sometimes with this build, but if you do get there, you get an absolutely devastating finisher turn out of it. So as always, we'll be going through the deck, and then we'll show it off in one card fight. So starting first with the ride deck, we of course have the special 5-card ride deck for Griphogila. That consists of our special starter, our 3 Calamity normal orders, and our overtrigger. So starting first with the Grade 0 starter, we of course have Gryphoseed. So his continuous ability says this unit gets power plus 2,000 for each Calamity card with a different card name in your soul. And then his auto ability says at the beginning of your main phase, you choose a Calamity card from your ride deck and put it into soul. Then you can put 3 Calamity cards from soul that were in the ride deck into the ride deck face up. To search your hand or deck for up to 1 Dragontree of Ecliptic Decimation, Griphogila, write it as stand, and if you searched your deck, shuffle your deck. And if you wrote a card, you choose 2 of your rearguard circles and put a Dragontree marker on each of them. So once again, I will assume that you have a basic understanding of how the whole Griphogila Dragontree thing works. If you don't, as always, you can refer to my Dragon Empire Griphogila video, and I go into it a little more in depth. But yeah, basically you just sit on this card until turn 3, not riding, putting your Calamities into soul instead, and then you send all 3 of those Calamities back to ride deck to Superior Ride Griphogila from your main deck. So that is the only way to get your Grade 10 Vanguard into play. And you also get 2 Dragontree markers when you ride into Griphogila. So I'll throw up a screenshot of the Dragontree markers. They just give any unit sitting on them an extra 5k during your turn if you have a Vanguard with Dragontree or Masks in its card name. So yeah, this is the mandatory starter to use with this deck since it's the only way to get Griphogila into play. And it does result in you having next to no soul when you do manage to ride into Griphogila, and also causes your first 2 turns to be pretty vanilla since you're stuck on Grade 0. But you need it to play your deck, so you don't really have an option there. So next we have our 3 Calamity normal orders, all of which have the same skill that is actually never used since they're just pieces that you move back and forth. So I'm not even going over the skill, but we do have 1 of each grade. So the Grade 1 is Beginning of the End. The Grade 2 is Ill-Omened Transmogrification. And the Grade 3 is Coming of Demise. So you never actually play any of those cards, you just move them from ride deck into soul, then from soul back to ride deck, and then remove them for Griphogila's ability. So then the last card in our ride deck is of course our overtrigger, so we have Star Dragon Deity of Infinitude, Eldo Breath. So his additional effect lets you double the power and critical of all of your front row units until end of turn. So an extremely powerful ability, and in this deck, since he's in the ride deck and not the main deck, You don't check into him randomly, but instead you have him guaranteed to hit on turn 6. So an absolutely devastating finisher for this deck. So that is the Ride deck. Moving on to the main deck. First off, for the grade 10s, we have 4 copies of the main Vanguard of the deck. Dragontree of Ecliptic Decimation, Griphogila. So he has his continuous ability that says during your turn, this unit gets power plus 5,000 for each Dragontree marker on your rearguard circles. And if you have 3 or more Dragontree markers, this unit gets critical plus 1. So you get 2 out of the 3 that you need for that crit from Grifoseed's ability, and then you gotta use some of your other cards in the deck to generate any more. But getting at least a third will give him an extra crit, and then any more you can get will power him up more and more. So it should make your center column pretty threatening throughout the entire game. And then he also has his auto ability that says once per turn, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, you choose a face-up Calamity card from your Ride deck and remove it. And if you did not remove a card, you choose a over trigger from your Ride deck, reveal it, activate all its trigger effects and additional effects, remove it, and stand all of your rearguards on rearguard circles with a Dragontree marker. So on turns 3 through 5, when you attack with him, you remove one of your Calamities, and then on turn 6, when you have run out of Calamities, you get to activate your over trigger. So a very slow deck, but on that turn 6, you get to activate Eldo Breath's trigger effects and additional effects. So that means you'll get to draw, you'll get to give the 100 million power to one of your units, and then you can double the power and critical of your entire front row. So Griphogila should be at 2 crit on his own by that point. So your center column should be swinging for 4 crit, and possibly near 100,000 at that point. So your Vanguard's going to be in perfect guard or no guard territory, pretty much. And then one of your rearguards should be swinging for 200 million power and at least 2 crit, with your other column being able to usually hit some pretty decent numbers as well. So on that big finisher turn, you do get 5 attacks, at least 3 of which being absolutely massive numbers and at least 2 crit. So unless your opponent has like 3 perfect guards in their hand or something, it's almost pretty much a guaranteed win on that turn. Eldo Breath is an insane over trigger in general terms, and in this deck being a guaranteed hit can be absolutely unstoppable for your opponent in a lot of cases. So extremely powerful ability. You do just have to find a way to survive long enough to actually get to use it. But yeah, very cool Vanguard for the deck. And of course I am running 1 copy of the standard triple rare Griphogila and then 3 copies of the double frame rare, just for aesthetic purposes. So that is all the grade 10s. Moving on to the grade 3s, we just have 3 copies of Cardinal Noid Plastea. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit's attack boosted by a Shadow Army token hits, you draw a card. So like I said before, we have robbed some Orfist support to use in this deck. So the only thing in this deck that can generate Shadow Army tokens is one of our set orders, actually. But if you can get a Shadow Army onto the board and then put Plastea in front of it, then your Dragontree marker will be giving Plastea an extra 5k, and the Shadow Army tokens, I'll throw up a screenshot of those real fast. They're just vanilla grade 1 units with 15,000 power. So if the Shadow Army is boosting Plastea, between its boost and the Dragontree marker, that column should be hitting for at least 33,000. And his attack doesn't have to hit a Vanguard to go off, it can hit anything. So even if you attack into a rearguard and it hits, you will still get that draw. So this card is just a good draw engine for the deck. It is a little piece reliant since it is vanilla if you don't have a Shadow Army token behind him to boost it. And again, we only have that 1 card in the deck that can generate Shadow Army tokens. So a little piece reliant, but a very nice plussing engine for this deck. And also just a good beat stick in general as well. So that is the only grade 3 in the deck. So moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we have 3 copies of Thunderous Fist Dragon, Gyrom Dragon. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you have 3 or more Dragontree markers on your rearguard circles, you Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1 and draw a card. So once again, another draw engine for this deck. It does require you to have 3 Dragontree markers out, so you'll have to generate at least 1 more, besides the 2 you get off of Griphogila in order to use this ability. And he does cost a Counterblast and a Soul Blast, so he is a little resource heavy as well. But we are running Bubble Mine in this deck to help with resources, and you definitely want to be able to draw as much as possible, especially with this deck having so many, shieldless cards in it. So more draw power is always a very welcome thing for this deck. So next we have 4 copies of our first world set order, which is Eclipse to Moonlight. So you can play it with a Counterblast 1, and it has its auto ability that says when this card is put into the order zone, you call a Shadow Army token to your rearguard circle. So this is the one and only card in the deck that can generate your Shadow Army tokens. So it is a +1 onto your board, and again, you primarily want to get that token behind Plastea in order to get his ability active to potentially get more draws off of him. We also have some cards in the deck that need set orders in play to do their thing as well, so this will also turn on their abilities. So a very vital card for the deck. It would be nice if we had a few more ways to generate some Shadow Army tokens, but space became an issue, so this was all I could manage to squeeze in. But yeah, definitely the most important set order in the deck. It also has its continuous ability that can change your world into Dark Knight or Abyssal Dark Knight, but none of the cards in this deck require your world to be those, so that continuous ability actually isn't relevant for anything. So then lastly for the grade 2s, we have 2 copies of the other world set order, Hallowing Moonlit Night. So you can play it with a Soul Blast 1, and its auto ability says when this card is put into the order zone, you draw a card. And again, it also has the same continuous ability that Eclipse Moonlight has that is irrelevant. So again, just yet another way to draw cards in this deck. It doesn't really do anything once you have it in the order zone, but, it gets you that extra card into your hand. And again, having a set order in play can be important for some of our other cards. So I did want to run a few extra set orders in the deck, besides just the 4 Eclipse Moonlight. So the less important of the 2, but still a useful card for the deck. So that is all the grade 2s. Moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 4 copies of Dragontree Wretch, Lloyd Exeri Youth. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you Counterblast 1 to choose one of your rearguard circles without any Dragontree markers and put a Dragontree marker. So this is your primary marker generator for the deck. It does give you the 3rd marker that you need in order to give Griphogila his extra crit, and also potentially more markers after that to power him up even more. And then he's got his 2nd auto ability that says once per turn, when a set order you played from hand is put into the order zone, you can Counterblast 1 to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 unit card with a grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from among them, call it to a rearguard circle in the same column as this unit, and shuffle your deck. So this ability I don't really use a ton. It's a bit more situational. Whenever you play a set order, it gives you a top 5 call. But the main issue with the skill is that you have to call that unit to the same column as Lloyd is in. Which, it'll always be funny to me that this, evil Dragontree spawn thing is just named Lloyd. But anyway, you have to call the unit from your deck into the same column as him, and really the only 2 unit cards you would want in the same column as him is Gyrom Dragon or maybe Bubble Mine. So you don't really have a ton of good targets for this, since if you find Plastea, you don't want Plastea in the same column as Lloyd. You want Plastea in front of your Shadow Army token. So you're kind of limited in your good targets for this card, so there's a good chance that it could whiff or just find something you don't really want in the same column as him. And it does cost another Counterblast, which between his first ability and Eclipsed Moonlight eating up your counterblasts, and potentially Gyrom as well. The deck is already kind of counterblast heavy. So between eating up your resources and potentially failing to find a good target, I don't actually end up using this very much. If you're really desperate to build a board, you can go for it, but it's a pretty situational skill that I often just choose not to use, and mainly just use him for his first ability. So next we got 4 copies of Detonation Monster Bobble Mine. So his auto ability says at the end of the battle, this unit boosted. If your order zone has a set order, you can put this unit into your soul and countercharge 1. So this ability is a -1, but it does give you 2 resources out of it since you gain a soul and a countercharge. So if you really need those resources to use some of your other abilities, you can go for it. Also nice if you're playing against a control deck and you know he's going to get wiped off your board anyway. You can just go ahead and clear him yourself and gain those resources out of it. So a pretty useful card, especially if you need that, extra counterblast to maybe play another copy of Eclipsed Moonlight and get a Shadow Army token onto your board, or what have you. So then the only other grade 1 we're running is 4 copies of our Sentinel Violate Dragon. So it's just your standard Perfect Guard. And of course you can't use Elementaria Sanctitude in this deck since your Vanguard is grade 10. So that's all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s. First off, we just have our trigger lineup, which of course there's only 15 triggers in the main deck since there are over triggers in the ride deck. So I do just have the rainbow triggers like usual. So I have 4 crit, 3 front, 4 draw, and 4 heal. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have our 4 copies of Patrol Robo Decker Cup. So his auto ability at the end of the battle is boosted. You can put it into your soul to choose one of your units, and it gets power plus 2,000 until end of turn. Don't really ever use that ability much. It can be nice to get some extra soul, but you usually don't want to give up that 15k shield to get it. So if you want to replace this with a vanilla crit, you can. Next up for the fronts, we have 3 copies of Cardinal Draco in Pyro. So front with a skill, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, get shield plus 5,000. So your 20k shield, front trigger. Next for the draws, we have 4 copies of Ameliorate Connector. So draw with a skill, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, shield plus 5,000. So your 10k shield, draw trigger. And then lastly for the heals, we have 4 copies of Alterate Sphere Dragon. So just the vanilla heal. Of course, if you want to run any of the effect heals, you can feel free to do so. And then the last grade 0 we have is just 2 copies of our Calamity Blitz Order Corrosive Smoke Signals. So there's no cost to play it, and you can play it if you have a Hydrogrom Vanguard, which Hydrogrom is the race of the Dragontree cards. And it lets you choose one of your rear guard circles without any Dragontree markers, put a Dragontree marker, then choose one of your units being attacked, and it gets power plus 10,000 until end of that battle. And if you have a Vanguard with Griphogila in its card name, it gets power plus 20,000 instead of plus 10,000. So this is the only other card in the main deck besides Lloyd that can generate Dragontree markers, so very useful in that regard. And it's also a 10k shield early or a 20k shield later game after you ride into Griphogila. So good defensive option either way. One thing to note is if you do play it early before you ride into Griphogila, since Griffo Seed doesn't require you to put the markers on circles that doesn't already have one, you actually can stack one of the markers you get from Griffo Seed on the same circle you put the marker from this card on. And that's actually the only way to get 2 Dragontree markers onto one Rigard circle. And if you do that, the power gain from them will stack. So that is a niche ability you can do with this card as well. So that is the deck, so we will go ahead and have our one fight with it. And let's see, I think I'll fight Taiji. And we will be going second.
Stand up! Vanguard! Ore no turn. Draw. Light. Skill発動.
So we'll get to search out his research order from his ride line. So we do not want to ride, and instead we want to use Griphoghila's ability to add beginning of the end to our soul, giving Griphogila an extra 2k, and then we'll just attack. And we get a crit trigger right off the bat.
Damage check. Damage check. Turn. Ore no turn. Draw. Light. Skill 発動.
And once again, he can search out his research order. Winchy then, please. And I think I'll let that one through. So once again, we want to end the phase without riding, and use Griphogila to put Ill Omen Transmogrification to soul, bringing him to 10k. And again, we can just attack. And we get a draw trigger.
Damage check. Turn. Ore no turn. Draw. さあ、乗ってきたぜ。ライド。セットオーダー。スキル発動。
And he plays his second research order.
スキル発動。パワープラス。コール。ヴァンガードにアタック。スキル発動。パワープラス。
So I'll guard that one with one of these draws. And Eva's skill will let him superior call an Obscadede from his deck. So I'm gonna let this one through. He gets a draw trigger.
Vanguard にアタック。スキル発動。パワープラス。
And I think I'll let this one through too, actually. Alright, so one last time, we do not want to ride. And instead use Griphogila to automatically put Coming of Demise into Soul, and then send all three calamities from Soul back to Ride deck to Superior Ride Griphogila. From the main deck. So then we get two Dragontree markers. So we'll put both of them on the front row. And unfortunately, we do not have a way to get a third marker right now, but we do have Eclipsed Moonlight, so we will go ahead and play it with a Counterblast one. And its skill will give us a Shadow Army token, which we will put over here. And then we'll call Plastea in front of it. And then we will go ahead and call Bubble Mine to our front row, actually, just to have another attack. So then we'll go ahead and attack with Griphogila first. And use his skill. To remove beginning of the end. And let that one through. He gets a heal trigger, which he does get. So I'm going to have Plastea attack into one of his Obscudeeds. And that'll trigger Plastea's skill since his attack hit. So we'll get to draw. And then we'll have Bubble Mine attack his other Obscudeed, since that's all he can hit. And let that one through too. And he gets his third research order into play. So that means he gets to bind Plastea. And I'm gonna let that one through. And he called Obscudeed over top of Obscudeed. But he'll gain a crit since he's got 3 research orders in play. So, let's see. I am going to perfect guard this one. And we'll discard that draw. He gets a crit trigger, which he stacks onto Obscudeed. So we'll guard this one with our Blitz order. So that'll give us another Dragontree marker, which I will put over here. And that gives Griphogila another 20k, so then we'll throw that crit in with it. And we'll guard that one with that heal. Alright, so now we can Persona Ride. And we drew our Dragontree Wretch, so we'll go ahead and call him over here. And use his ability to Counterblast. And get one more Dragontree marker, which we'll put right there. And we'll go ahead and move him to the front row. And then I am going to go ahead and play Eclipsed Moonlight once again. So Counter Blast. And use Eclipsed Moonlight skill to get another Shadow Army token, which I will put behind the Vanguard, actually. And I am not going to use Lloyd's second ability. So instead, we'll move the Shadow Army token up and just attack with the Vanguard first for a whopping 58,002 crit. And use Griphogila's skill to remove Ill-Omen Transmogrification as he perfect guards. And we get a front trigger. And a heal trigger, which we do get. So we will heal 1 and give that power to our Shadow Army token. Alright, so I'm going to have the Shadow Army token take out his Obscudeed. And then we'll have Lloyd attack his other rear guard, I think. And we'll go ahead and use Bubble Mind's ability to put him to Soul and counter charge. And he does get his Persona Ride once again, and plays his last research order. So he gets to bind Lloyd. But he does not have any more Obscudeeds in his main deck, so he won't be able to Superior Call, so he's only going to get 2 attacks. So I'm going to let this one through, actually. He gets a draw trigger. And let's see, we'll guard that one with crits and a heal. Alright, so we do not get our Persona Ride, but we will go ahead and call Garon Dragon, and we'll put him over here, and we can use his ability to Counter Blast and Soul Blast. And we get to draw, and we drew Plastea, so we'll move this Shadow Army token back and put Plastea in front of it. And then I think I'll just go ahead and attack with Griphogila first. And we'll use his ability to remove our last Calamity Order from the ride deck as he perfect guards once again. So I'm going to have Plastea attack as Vanguard, actually. And he lets it through. So Plastea's skill will let us draw once again. And then Gyrom will attack his rear guard.
ノーガードターンエンド俺のターンドローペルソナライド
And he did get his persona ride.
スキル発動パワープラススキル発動
And he's getting dangerously close to decking out. He's only got 5 cards left in his deck.
ヴァンガードにアタック
But he's only getting 2 attacks here. So let's see. We'll guard. We'll guard with those 2.
ガードドライブチェックドライブチェックヴァンガードにアタック
And I'll go ahead and just let that one through.
ノーガードすごいなダメージチェックターンエンド俺のターンドロー
Alright, so we do not get our persona ride, but this is our big push turn, so I'm going to go ahead and declare final turn.
ファイナルターン
So I will go ahead and call one of these Lloyds back here, and we'll use his ability
スキル発動
to get our 5th Dragontree marker onto our back row center. So with that, we will go ahead and attack with Gyrom first.
ヴァンガードにアタックノーガード
He lets that one through.
ダメージチェッククリティカルトリガー
He gets a crit
クリティ
trigger.
カルプラスパワープラス
So then we can attack with Plastea for 38,000.
ガード
And he guards. So then we'll attack with Griphogila,
ヴァンガードにアタック
and with his ability,
グリフォギーラのスキル発動
we have no calamities to remove, so we'll get to activate Eldo Breath. So we get to draw, and we can give 100 million power, which I will give to Gyrom.
パワープラスパワー
And then the power and critical of our whole front row is doubled, bringing Griphogila to 96,004 crits. But he does perfect guard.
完全ガードドライブチェックドライブチェック
Alright, so then we can attack with Gyrom for 200,043,000, 2 crit,
ノーガード
and he's got to let it through.
ダメージチェッククリティカルトリガー
And that crit does not save him, so we got him with that one.
パワープラス
And he had 1 card left in his deck anyway.
素晴らしいファイターだ
So there you go, that was my Brandt Gate Griphogila deck. Like I said, a very devastating finisher turn with that Eldo Breath ability. So anyway, I'll be back soon with more deck profiles. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.